to this Indie Spotlight Fantasy Fellowship Author Q&A session. I'm Ellie. You'll know me as Nimphona on Discord. Joining us today for this Q&A session is Ryan Cahill. Ryan is currently one of the biggest rising authors in the indie publishing scene at the moment, and he is also the author of the epic fantasy series The Bound and the Broken. The series currently spans 3 novels and 2 novellas, which it feels really weird to say because for the last year it's been 2 novels. And the newest addition.
It feels weirder for me to hear.
The newest addition to his series is Of War and Ruin, and that only came out 5 days ago. So without any further ado, let's get going. How are you today, Ryan?
Yeah, pretty good. Mostly amped up on energy drinks, which feels like my life right now. But yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, know that feeling. It was 6:30 and I had my first one.
I would be having my first one if I had to do an interview at 6:30 as well. So yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So we've worked together with some members of the community to pull together some of their most frequently asked questions. And I think you've probably answered most of them about 1 million times before.
Oh, look, it's still fun.
Does it ever get boring?
Honestly, no. It's kind of what I think. Like if it was in like a text interview, when I had to type it all out, that gets boring. Yeah. Like doing it like this is never boring. It's always fun.
Fair enough. So we're going to start with some like background behind your series and like a bit of your writing history.
Yeah.
If that's okay. So the first one, how old were you when you came up with the idea for the Bound and the Broken series, and where did the idea stem from?
Well, it's kind of a weird one. Like I'd say I was probably technically like 28. But like I kind of when it came up when it took form as this series was kind of like like 28 or so. But there's always been like something in the background sitting there, but I was never actually writing anything, so it wasn't really anything. It was just basically I used to daydream and now I daydream on paper. So
it's a good daydream. It's working.
Yeah, well, yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. So your brother has a lot of involvement with like some of your artwork and chapter icons. Was it something he was ever aware of before it came to like fruition, or was it only when you were like, I have a first book, can you chapter icon?
Yeah, well, it was before I finished it. I'd kind of said it to him because I'd always thought it would be cool for me to have a book and for him to kind of illustrate it. I thought it would just be a really cool idea.
Yeah.
And then I always liked the idea of using chapter icons to help denote the characters and then kind of telling small stories with the chapter icons too. So, as things change, and I think like there's some people who notice, like, I'm not going to give anything depending on spoilers, but some people will notice that it's like one certain chapter icon changes from 2 rings to 1 ring when it goes from book 1 to book 2, and then that changes again later on when it's going into the latter part of book 2 and into book 3. And so that was just something I always thought was really fun, and Aaron is fantastic when it comes to art. So, and everyone thinks it's for free. Everyone's like, oh, how lucky are you to get artwork for free? It's not for free.
It's not free, no.
It is not free. No.
Maybe slightly like less, but not free. I'd like to think anyway. A little bit, or no?
I think we started there. That's not where it is now.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Did you ever write anything before The Bound and the Broken that didn't get picked up or just didn't feel right for you?
Blood and Fire was the first thing I ever wrote.
Wow.
First thing I've written since I was like 15, doing I suppose technically 18, doing like creative writing stuff in secondary school, which is like, I don't even know what the equivalent English one is, like when you're like 17, 18, and what the school is called. Is it secondary school in England as well, or in the UK?
So you're secondary school till 16, then college here.
Yeah. So like in Ireland, we'll interchange college with university, like it's the same thing. But yeah, so kind of it's the first thing I ever technically like creatively wrote, because when we were back in school, you just like learned something by heart and then rewrote it in an exam. So.
Fair enough. Yeah. Wow. Okay. Which authors or people in your life are your biggest inspirations for your books? And along that same thought, our members mentioned that they get a lot of Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings, and John Gwynne vibes from Of Blood and Fire. Are there any other like fantasy books or authors that you took inspiration from while writing it?
Yeah, there's loads. There's loads and loads and loads. Like it's funny because people will always kind of say, "Oh, I get this and I get that," and loads of the time it's in a positive light. Sometimes it's in a negative light, and it's kind of, I think you're always an amalgamation of all the influences we have throughout our life. And like for me, some of the biggest, excuse me, energy drink makes me burp. Some of the biggest ones for me, like Naomi Novik was massive for me for dragons. Like Temeraire was like such a huge influence for me. And like there was Aragon as well, but that was when I was quite a bit younger, and then I kind of faded out of that as it started to go through the series. I was kind of getting less and less interested in it. Whereas Naomi Novik's Her Majesty's Dragon, or His Majesty's Dragon, I read the first book, and then a few years passed, and my friend was like, who I always read the same books as him, and he was like, "You do know that that's actually like a huge series now?" And I was like, "Oh yes, please!" And I destroyed it. And it was the same with John Gwynne. I think I read Malice when it came out, and then I'm pretty sure I read the second book. I read Valor, and then I was noticing he was kind of just releasing reading regularly, and I just consumed them all. And yeah, kind of the same like Wheel of Time and stuff too. There's definitely a lot of those vibes in it, because what I kind of wanted to do with the series for me was, I remember at one stage I went back to read like Lord of the Rings. And I love Lord of the Rings, but it was quite hard for me to read just because the prose in it is older, and it's not as straightforward. And some of my books when I was younger, the books you read and you go, "Oh my God, I love these books." But when you go back to read them as an adult, you realize they're maybe not as, the prose doesn't flow the way it did for you when you were a kid. And, I wanted to kind of get a book that captured that nostalgia with adult fantasy, so that you could read it and it would be where you wanted it to be, and it would be leveled up to, not leveled up in quality, but leveled up in kind of the things you would expect now from the books. And that was kind of what I wanted to capture, particularly for the first book. I wanted it to be kind of like an entry to classic fantasy style book, and then like explode the world from there, really.
It does that. I did that with so I convinced one of my friends to start reading Dragonlance Chronicles, and back in the 80s, and when I was a lot younger in the mid 90s, it was amazing. And then I reread it and I was like, whoa, this isn't quite as easy to read as it was maybe when it was in the time it was written. So there's
definitely a shift in towards more accessible prose. I didn't understand what accessible truly meant until I started writing it, and people said it to me, that's what I was writing. And I realized, I say probably my biggest influence from actual writing, so the way I write on the page and the way my words read, is definitely John Gwynne. I know John Gwynne and David Gemmell, like I can see now that people pointed it out to me. I didn't know at the time, but when they pointed it out to me and I read it, and I was reading Shadow of the Gods and Hunger of the Gods, and I realized that it's really similar to my style. Whereas I've read George R. Martin and Joe Abercrombie, and they're not even close.
No.
Like I read Joe Abercrombie for a little bit, and I was actually, but not even just in what he writes, but quite literally the way he puts words together on the page. And I was reading it going, "Oh, I'll never be this good, ever, ever, ever." And then I sat down a little bit sad for maybe 15 minutes, and I was like, actually, do you know what? It's totally different. They're not even comparable. No. And which is something I think can be hard to come to terms with. But I probably went off on a tangent there, but that's my life.
No, it's fine. That kind of flows into the next question, to be fair, though, so you're all right. The Bound and the Broken series has a very classic, like, traditional fantasy feel to it, as opposed to a lot of the grimdark that seems to be flooding fantasy genre these days. What made you opt for that style of the story instead of going with the flow?
Well, it's kind of, honestly, I don't think I put that much thought into it. Like I think it's classic fantasy, in that what people call classic fantasy now is kind of more, the adventure heroic fantasy. And what I wanted to do was mesh that with grimdark in a way. I don't think my book is grimdark, but I also think it's a lot darker in tone in certain parts than normal classic fantasy. Yeah. And I heard someone use the term Grimheart a while ago. I think it was Justin T. Cole. And it was kind of what I wanted was something more actually is, what it takes to kill someone, how it's usually glossed over in classic fantasy books, and how, like, because usually even in like Star Wars, you have the stormtroopers and they just die and nobody cares, and
Yeah.
and you have the orcs, and kind of wanted to, I have stuff like the orcs in the book, but you'll see when you come into the later part of the series how there has always been a lot more planned for them than simply them just being something that was fodder. But I really wanted to kind of do that, take the pieces of grimdark that I loved, and place them into the kind of classic fantasy to make the tone of it a bit darker, but while also having hope. And it was just, I think naturally the way I write, and I think probably a lot of the influence is John Gwynne. I think he captures that quite well in The Faithful and the Fallen, in particular parts. So I think it's something that kind of naturally came into the way that I wrote, and it's in The Wheel of Time too. It starts off kind of a bit more classic fantasy, but there's parts of it that are so unbelievably dark.
Yes,
like
yes,
when you go to when they're in is it Sam where Egwene has the collar, the Adam put on her.
Oh yeah.
And like that is dark as fuck. I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but I'm gonna it's my I'm gonna say it's cultural. But like it is so dark. I got to that part and I was going, wow, this is like really seriously off tone for where the area was in the book at the time.
I mean, there are parts of even John Gwynne. Even some of John Gwynne's stuff is quite dark. You think, well, have I read the from like page to page, and you just think, okay, a little bit of a lapse there. But no, that makes sense actually. Yeah, that does make sense. Someone once asked me if I'd recommend them for like your books for like they're quite a young adult, and I was like, well, it depends because every person's different, you know. And I thought, she's 13, I don't want to scare her or anything. I was like, I would read the first one. I said, but I suggest you maybe read the second one to see if it's something you want her to read. And she was like, oh, okay. And then she was like, oh, I love it, and my daughter loves it. So I was like, oh, thank God for that, because otherwise I'd be like, I would say, ooh.
Even an easier one is like if you read The Fall, because we'll get to it later on. I think there's questions to do with that. But if you read The Fall, I think The Fall is quite a good representative of what the series is and where the series can go, and the types of things I'll touch on in the series. And I think I'd always say, like, because there's always this not mashup, but there's always kind of this question as to what YA is. And like I can firmly tell by the tone of my stories that it's not YA traditionally by the tone. There's nothing wrong with YA. People only have a problem with YA when the book is not meant to be YA.
Yeah.
As long as the book is meant to be YA, that's exactly what's meant to be. But I think I would recommend it for mature young readers. If there's maybe like 15 or so, because even in the first book, it's not as graphic in some of the stuff, but there is some still pretty graphic stuff, and it does deal with some dark themes. And it's one of those things that I think if you're a mature 15, 16-year-old, I don't think would be a problem, personally. But yeah, like you said, anyone's different.
Yeah.
For everyone.
Yeah, it was only after she said, oh, she's read this and this. I was like, oh, I think she'll be all right with the first one. But yeah, definitely gets a bit darker in the second one onwards. I was like, but it depends. Everyone's different. If she can deal with that kind of stuff, then there's no reason she can't read it. But to me, anyway, if she was my kid, I'd be like, yeah, you crack on. You come to me if you've got a problem with it, you know?
Oh, God.
So we're going to move on to like some character lore questions now.
Yeah.
First one, are any of the characters based off or inspired by people in your life or similar in their mannerisms or behaviour? If at least not a full inspiration, such as maybe Amy, Aaron, or yourself?
I think for other people, I wouldn't say there is. I try not to think of it like that, because then if somebody sees themselves in a character, it's like, oh crap, you know, especially if something bad happens. I do have some Tuckerized characters, and I do add some small traits. Like you'll see the character Jorah Sarn in the third book is Tuckerized from my editor, Sarah, and I kind of try and put her sassy sense of humor and her wit into the character, and it's something that I really wanted to do. And then there's another character called Taya in the third book who is Tuckerized from my proofreader, Taya. And I kind of wanted to put her a bit like Taya's a bit of a badass just in general. She's cool as shit. And I kind of wanted to put that through too. But I think like for the other characters, because I think there's little pieces of my personality in all of them, really, is in a lot of the main cast. Whereas like I think I would think a lot like Kaelin, in the way I do things. Whereas I also think my sense of humor is injected into Dan quite a lot. And like even with Wrist would also have, I was a major bookworm as a kid and still am. And I was very much like, my mom would wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning and I'd have stolen her phone and I'd be using it. This is when I was like 7 or 8, like very young, and I was using it as like a light to read, because I wouldn't have had a phone myself. And there's loads of little pieces in it that I think are definitely, pieces of me. And even in Ella, like the way she looks at Rhett, and the kind of the surety in how she sees the person she loves, in that like there's just, it doesn't matter. There's nothing else is really consequential there, which is kind of part of the way I think about stuff too. So I think there's little pieces, but I try not to have like a full kind of self-injection of character in. I like to just put tiny personality traits.
It makes sense, actually. But then it makes sense that also all of them have a little piece of you. You're the one writing them.
Yeah, I think some of it kind of came almost completely just naturally, and some of it I kind of put in intentionally to try and add little bits to them. But it's easy to create a character flaw when some of the flaws are coming from you.
Yeah. And then on from that, actually, these quite well. Which character from The Bound and the Broken do you enjoy writing about the most? And conversely, which one do you struggle to write for the most, and why is that?
So I'd say it'd probably be no surprise to a lot of people that Dan and Belina are probably my 2 favorite characters to write. I love getting the humor in there, and then in the 3rd book, writing like Magnus was really fun as well. But I also love writing Dane. I love writing him so much. It's a really good character for me to get into the head of. And then, I could probably go on. There's a reason why I have so many characters, because I really like writing them. And there's none I don't like writing. And so with Caelan as well, I love writing him because I love having the journey. Because for me, what I wanted Caelan to be was kind of like the main character who actually isn't the main character at the start of the book. When you look back through the series, he is actually just a character in Aeson's story. And Aeson is the one who's trying to do something, and Caelan is just dragged along for the ride. But then I love making him grow and learn and change and having this thing. For me, I want Caelan to be growing into this massive arc as the series goes through. And I think for me, the hardest character to write can be Kalimvar, because although he's really fun to write, creating obstacles for what essentially is a Space Marine super soldier Iron Man is tough. And so I've had to kind of lean more into the human element of him. And it's something that I'm starting to really enjoy, and something that I've liked to explore is his faith and his strength and the people around him, and what loss does to him. Is that you can't, like, he's a super soldier, but there's other things that can break him, and it's something that I've enjoyed exploring, but it's been very tough. It's been tough trying to inject him into a world without overpowering him.
Yeah, that makes sense though, because although he is all those things, he still has a heart there. That makes sense,
And that's it exactly. And it's kind of almost similar to Caelan in a way. Is like, it's one of the biggest problems you will ever have when you use dragons, like I use dragons, is how do you stop them from being a nuclear weapon that solves all the plot? And it's something that's really fun to try and do, and creating obstacles in it. When you have another dragon in the world who's like 7 times the size of him, it makes it a bit easier. But there's different things that it can make it quite difficult, and it's fun to come up with different choices, but it can be tough.
As you just finished speaking about Caelan, we'll go on. I had a question, but I'm gonna swap it. Regarding your Dralade in the books, has there ever been one born from another? Because there's no mention so far, or they don't talk about it. They all talk about like outliving their family, and that's part of being Dralade. So has there ever been one born from another? Or will there ever be?
Yeah, but it's not a hereditary thing. So it's in one that, you only become a Dralade by being bonded to a dragon. So when you're born, you can't be that. You're just born. And it's a very common thing, but that's not how that would happen, and it doesn't always happen that flows down the line at all.
Okay.
So technically yes, but also technically no.
No. And then leading on from that one, has there ever been Dralades that just didn't find their eggs or sulking? So, for example, had Kaelin not gone with Aeson, would the egg still have called out to him, or would it not?
This is the thing is what makes the other question not work, is that it's the presumption that it's a fated thing. So, as in, no one is a Dralade until they've been bound. So the idea is, so in this, no. So this was technical answer. I haven't actually answered this question before, but it's not something that I think I need to dig into too much in the text. That can kind of come up naturally anyway, so it doesn't matter too much. But it's the idea that there is no one true soul that they're going to bond to. It's more the idea of there could be, it's the same thing as when people talk about true love. You could find someone and have true love with someone, and you could love them for 50 years' time. But there might also be 500 people in the world who you'd be able to do that with. It doesn't make what you have any less unique, but at the same time, there's different ways that could have happened, and it would have formed different relationships, and the two people would have become different characters. But there's definitely there's more than one possibility when it comes to that.
Okay, fair enough. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And then the other one is, so you've got user language when you've got a Dralade and a Sulkin, the old tongue. Is that something you'd always intended to create? Are there plans to continue developing it? A good example, similar to yours, is obviously in George R. R. Martin's books, he's got the Dothraki, and he then released a book on it and how to translate English to Dothraki. So is that fully mapped out now, or is it a continual developing language?
It's definitely a continually developing thing, and it's something that I had always planned on doing, and I wanted to do it kind of more extensively than you'd see it in some places, in that I have been building, the numbering system and different conjugations and verbs and tenses and whatnot, how to do that. But I don't feel personally like I'm not a linguist. So what I am doing is flawed, but I suppose language is inherently flawed anyway. If you look at the English language, there's probably nothing more flawed than the English language. But I just like with George R. R. Martin, I'm pretty sure George R. R. Martin didn't actually flesh out the language to that extent himself. I'm reasonably sure that there was whole translating teams involved in that, and because Tolkien is obviously a complete outlier in the fact that he is and was a linguist, and there's actually another word for what he was, and I can't remember for the life of me. But he was the top tier of that, so he was always going to be able to do that. So I would love to flesh it out completely, to a point that it's actually a language that could be thought. But I don't think I'm there at the level to do it myself. Definitely, it's building and building and building, and there's so much there to it already, so much behind the scenes that isn't being used yet. But I don't think it's at a level where I could, actually use it to someone in fluent conversation and teach someone how to do it. But it would take years and years. Even with Tolkien's level, it took decades, I think, pretty sure.
Yeah, that language was fast though. It was a very expansive one. So the rest of the questions are just general ones that have just cropped up. They're regularly occurring, and people ask a lot in the Discords and stuff. So this one will be exciting, I think. You probably wouldn't have been asked this unless you've spoken to someone since Of War and Ruin. So let's start with that. This is significantly longer than your previous books, especially the full.
No.
Was it always planned to be, or did you just find you couldn't stop writing, or there was always just more to come from that?
There's a bit of both. It was always going to be longer. So I did a lot of this very intentionally. So I've said it before, when I wrote Of Blood and Fire, I intentionally did not put as many POVs in, because, like I said, it was the first thing I'd ever written, and I was very conscious that I was not skilled enough to control a large cast. I didn't have the experience, and I had a feeling that I would end up getting lost. So what I wanted to do was have a stronger singular POV with small kind of splashings or sprinklings of other points of view, to kind of let the reader know that this won't be just one point of view. And then I used the fall I did exactly what you're not meant to do in a novella. So in a novella, you're meant to have generally as concise as you can get it, like single POV, single point in time, single place. So naturally, I had 4 completely distinct points of view, all kind of running around the same city. But that for me was practice in trying to really hone in on narrative voice and characters, and how to try and I did specific things very intentionally. So you will see that both Elvira and Kalimvar walk down the same hallway in the fall, and they both describe it differently, and they both focus on different things. You can see how Elvira walks down and she sees the grandeur of the hall, and she sees the white stone and the red carpet, whereas when Kalimvar walks down the hallway, he compares the white stone and the red carpet to the pale of dead bodies and the red of blood, and he sees how exuberant the spending is. And so that's something I want to try and practice and try and do. So then when I went to Of Darkness and Light, I could take that and apply it and then spread the points of view out. And then what I wanted to do when I went to The Exile was take a single character and really just nail into their emotions and what drove them, and then try and use that to improve my character work for Of War and Ruin. So it's kind of something I've always wanted to expand and keep moving and building. And then Of War and Ruin was kind of meant to be, I planned on War and Ruin to be about 320,000 words. So I overshot by about a book.
Yep.
So about 430,000 words it went to. But I think what happened was, I know exactly what happened. It wasn't just that I kept writing, because when I write, I always know the ending. So I know the last line of every book before I write the book. And that's what I'll always do. I don't plan it out. Like, I don't have like spreadsheets of plans, but I know this is where it ends. This is the last line. I knew before I wrote A Blood and Fire that you were going to get that coin flick at the end. I knew there was going to be, I always do that, because if you have an end goal, it's much easier to keep on track. So I'll do that, and then I'll plan out beats and points that I know need to happen. These pivotal moments have to happen for these characters to get to where I want them to go emotionally and like geographically. So it was never just going to randomly grow. But what happened was the other characters, Ella, Dane, Rist, Dal, and Dan, they all have triple the word count in this book that they had in the previous book. And I was worried about the change in size, but then I kind of realized as I'm doing it, all that happened was these characters are coming much more to life in this book. You're seeing so much more of who they are, what makes them tick, which was my exercise from The Exile. So I wanted to do that and kind of, and I know that a lot of the readers who have gone through War and Ruin so far, there's characters like Ella. One thing that I love, this is slightly off topic on a tangent, is that I think a lot of readers, because of how quickly we consume and turn over media now with books, and the race to 100 books in a year, and a lot of the time we lose a lot of patience with books. Whereas if you go to, and I think that's changing now. I know for me now, with the fact that I'm building readers who kind of like the world and are coming back, and they're willing to trust me, which I don't think they're willing to do when they just read the first book. And I think it's that trust in the author that something is being done for a reason. Whereas, you'll see some of the comments, people start going, this storyline is pointless and it means nothing to the world. And I'm like, you're completely wrong. And it's very, very important, just not yet. So like you see, and that's the thing, like with Ella, I needed Ella to have that slower journey in the first book. I needed to show that she was witty and smart, but also slightly naive. And I wanted to show her changing and building and developing. And, if you try and do that shorthand, you end up like that Wheel of Time scene in the series where Perrin just fucking hacks a made-up wife with an axe, which is not what I wanted. I wanted to feel real. Yeah. I think the most important thing for me when writing, like the single most important thing for everything, is that character at every moment has to make the logical choice that they would make. It seems silly, but it's not as common as I thought it would be. Sometimes it can be easy to make a character do something they might not do because it suits the narrative that you want. But like, I kind of try and trust it. Like if the character's going to make a choice, I go, no, actually, they would definitely do this at that moment.
Yeah.
So yeah.
That makes sense, because the minute they stop doing what the sort of things they've done, unless they'd have like a major development arc in that, like before making that decision, it wouldn't. Yeah, as you say, it wouldn't feel real, and reading it would be a bit like, well, what happened in this last bit to make them then go, I'm going to do this, instead of what you think they would have done.
Yeah, and it's something that I love now. Like, even singularly in reading Of War and Ruin, like I know when I'm going back to do my editing and my formatting now, when I look at the start and see where the characters ended up at the end of that book, there was such a massive journey for all of them. But then to take them and put them back at the start of A Blood and Fire, it makes me very happy to see how far and how massively they've changed, but naturally.
Yeah.
Like,
I have loved seeing like people's change on so many characters in Of War and Ruin. They're going, oh my god, I love this one. I hated them before, but I absolutely love them. So there are some amazing.
That's one of my favorite things to see. That's why I single out Ella, because a lot of the time, I know it does tend to be guys, which I think is just a thing when it comes to books, when they see the main female character coming through, because instantly she's not like this super badass bitch or this damsel in distress, which are like the two instant stereotypes in writing. She's a little bit of both. She's witty and sharp, but she likes dresses, and she's kind of naive at points, but she's learning. And so some people definitely got frustrated with her in the first book, and then the second book they were like, well, actually she's not bad. And then you move forward, you're like, oh no, actually. And I love seeing the change. And when I have my beta readers and my document at the end, and like, who's your favorite character? Has there been changes? And it was just like Elafarda. And that was just like, it was so cool for me to see, because two characters who weren't massive in the first book.
Yeah, complete tangent for me, but Farda is one of my favourite characters. He is very much like my Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones. His character development is literally on point. Like, it is so he emotionally and everything, he has just come like he's done like a hurdle marathon. Really, he really has gone, boom, I'm over here now. But yeah, it has been a good read, very good read.
So, fun fact on the side, he wasn't even a character when I was writing the book at the start. He was a captain. And I wrote the captain, and the captain was watching Cahill from the boat, and then for some reason he flicked the coin. And then I actually just stopped writing, went aside, and put everything away. I went and had a drink, came back, and I wrote like 400 or 500 years of backstory. And then he was almost fully formed immediately, just at that moment. Wow. It was like, this character.
Because of that one line. one
quite literally, yeah.
That's cool. So you said earlier, this is a different complete tangent as well. You said earlier you always know the ending of the book before you know anything else. Does that mean you already know whatever you're writing next, you know that last line, or have you not sat down and gone, that's the last line yet?
It depends. So I knew, so that the last main line outside the epilogue in book 3, I've known since writing A Blood and Fire. So I knew that's where that was going. That was always going there. 100%. Now, for book 4 and 5, I don't have that nailed down yet. And that's going to be what I'm going to be doing now. I'm going to take a small break here and deciding exactly where I want this to go, because I almost view this series as kind of being cut right now, like a bookmark is there. And this is a whole new thing with the ending we see in the 3rd book. There's a lot. There's a lot that's changing. It's kind of like if you could have one thing that changes the world, instead we have 4. And there's a lot of different things happening, a lot of wheels turning, which I'm kind of terrified about. But I was like, maybe I could just not do 1 or 2 of these, because like it would be so much easier just to not do 1 or 2 of these. And then I was like, nah, because I'm an absolute sadist. So, I mean, so I have to sit down and work it out. But I know where it's all going in general, but breaking it into sections and kind of deciding on even some of the bigger sweeps of what's going to happen. But yeah.
Now this is a controversial question, very controversial question. You wrote Of Blood and Fire before you wrote The Fall, and despite The Fall happening first chronologically, there's always a lot of debate in the fandom about what book to start with. In your opinion, as the person who wrote it, which is the best of order of reading for a reader's experience.
So another fun fact, I technically didn't write A Blood and Fire before the fall. What I did was I wrote the first chapter, a virus chapter in the fall, was originally the prologue for A Blood and Fire. But if you hack a half of it off, so it wasn't as extensive as it was. And then eventually I ended up pulling that out and creating the first 2 chapters, which was Elvira and Kalenvar. And what I did was I actually used that as 2 short stories as a sign up to my newsletter before I finished A Blood and Fire. Then just to make everything more complicated. Then I wrote A Blood and Fire, and then I wrote the last 2 sections of the fall and put it together as a novella. So it's technically sandwiching it, but yes. I think the thing with this is there really is, and it's not a cop-out answer. There is no correct answer because I wrote the fall intentionally that it could be read on either side. And the reason I did it is because I wanted to use it both as a way into the world and also a thing to drag people onto my newsletter after they finished the first book. So it was quite intentionally written that it could be read either way. I never expected it to become this contentious a thing, but I definitely did write it that way. So the way I look at it is very much the fall is an absolute no hand-holding. You are dropped into a world. I try and kind of dig into the characters as much as is possible in such a short space of time to give people something to grab onto. But as far as the world goes, you are just dropped in the middle of a frying pan. And it's just grapple with it, watch the action, find out about the characters, learn the history, and that's just, balls to the wall chaos. And if you like the idea of that, I think as well, if the fall is very much indicative of showing how powerful some of the characters can be and showing where the series can go and showing some of the style of action that's in it and some of the world and history and the writing. So if you want to get a taste for that, it's definitely good to read it first. But then if you're someone who loves the Wheel of Time, a lot of classic fantasy, and you like that slower burn, I want to learn a bit about the world gradually through these characters, and then I can have something crazy happen afterwards, which just adds everything to it, I would read it afterwards. So that was actually the intention the whole time. So it's not a cop-out answer, even though I'm going to be told it's a cop-out answer.
No, I read the full on my first read through. I read it first. That was to dip my toes, see if your style of writing melded with me, and if I liked the world and where it was going. And then on every other reread, I've read Of Blood and Fire, the full, Of Darkness and Light, the full, The Exile.
I was gonna say that's actually another popular one. Is just read and honestly, right? So the way I've written it, what I really tried to do with the series was to put as many possible references and Easter eggs to the whole series that ties back to both novellas. So what I wanted to do with the novellas is basically create them as companions that do not need to be read, but the series will take a whole new life when you read it. So you'll see the plot line of The Exile seems very much about Dane. And then, it is about Dane and his series, and Belina, but it's Dane's story, and Belina is making sure he doesn't die. And that's kind of that's what the story seems like. And then you go to the third book and you will see that one of the major plot lines in the third book is based off something that happens in The Exile. And you don't need to have read The Exile because it's its own thing here. But if you have, then you can kind of go, oh shit, I know what this is. And I know who that is. And that's what I kind of wanted to do. And the more that people realize, a lot of people then realize that when you go and you see Farda in A Blood and Fire and you read on, then some people clock that he was actually mentioned in one of the novellas. And then you realize that there's stuff going back and forth. And that's kind of what I always wanted to do. That the more you read it, the more you'd see, because they were the books that I loved. So I wanted to do that with it. So it's really, hearing anyone reread the story is really cool for me, because someone given time to read the book once is incredible, but to go back over it is
I have read it 6 times in the last year alone.
Holy crap!
Because buddy reads, and then your Discord read along, and then the Fantasy Fellowship Discord read along. Since literally August, I have read it every month until January.
You've probably read it as many times as I have at this stage.
Because that's just how things fell. So we did a buddy read on one server, and then I read it for one readathon, and then it hit the target for October's readathon in Fantasy Fellowship. Then you did your read along on your Discord, and then the Fantasy Fellowship did one leading into January for your Indie Spotlight. And I was just like, I am gonna be like on form for these things. Like when people are like, we've heard this character before, haven't we? And I'm like, yes, you have. In book 1. Go back and read it. But yeah, it's it has become literally my favourite series. It literally, I said to my dad was like, are you reading anything at the moment? I was like, yes. And you should read it too. And I was like, here you go, and handed him my books, and he was like, this is amazing. And I was like, yes, it is. It is very good. So even my dad's read it now.
I am physically and mentally incapable of taking nice things, and so
it's
I would
fine.
just probably stare at the screen absently. But
it's
it really
good.
does. It's really incredible to hear. So it's very fun.
It is just nice though to see like how far your fandom have just gone boomf, and everybody, like, you broke the website the other day just on your release.
That was very cool, because it's very funny, because before the launch I was texting Matt, who's the owner of the Broken Binding, and I had said, look, I think we just I really am sure how this is going to go, because we haven't really had the chance to promote it properly, and the physical books are kind of delayed behind the ebook, which is really, it's upsetting for me, because I kind of wanted to have everything at the same time, and we need to lower our expectations. And then I refreshed the screen and it wouldn't refresh. And then I went back to the main page and I searched, and then it told me that it wouldn't search. And then Matt called me and said, in a big, like, Brummy accent that I cannot imitate at all. And he's like, you broke the website. And I was like, what do you mean I broke the website? If you broke it, it doesn't work. And I was like, oh shit. But yeah.
That makes sense.
So that was pretty weird, but cool.
It must make you realise though how wanted and valuable, like, how much people want to read it though.
Well,
or did it not have that with you?
Before, so literally 2 minutes after it went on sale, one went up on eBay, which was really fucking weird. Excuse me.
It was your numbered one. It was a numbered copy. Literally, someone must have literally just bought it. It was up for £45 and 80p and £5.60 postage. Yeah, and it sold.
That's actually ridiculous. Oh, I know it sold, because I went to look for it and it was gone.
Yeah, it had. And I was like, that could have been the one I got, but I got told it was out of stock. I was really angry. I was like, grr. But no, it's good.
Because I know the spillover went in like
a few
3 or 4 seconds, which was a bit weird. It's still, honestly, it's really fucking weird. Yeah, I don't have other. It is very weird. So
and maybe it might hit soon. Might hit you soon.
I don't think it will. I don't think it will. It is, like I said, it's just I'm still daydreaming like I always have. I'm just doing it on paper now, so it's very strange, but cool.
People like your daydreaming then, so that's one thing.
Yeah.
So novellas, your fans have loads of ideas for them, such as Aeson and the Egg.
I know.
More Darlin and Belina. In all seriousness, what are your plans for them going forward, or have you not got any for your novellas?
I do. I have a few, but the kind of idea is that I like to be careful with the novellas. Like I said, with The Exile in the Fall, for me, it's really important to be very intentional with what I'm doing with the series. I want everything to be for a reason. So, like, a lot of the things that happen in the Fall and in The Exile really link into the main series and really amplify it. So, for me, there are things I have contemplated doing, like Aeson going for the egg. But for me, if I do that, I really, really need to lean into his character and his motivations a lot. And it's something that I need to sit down and think about. There's some other bits I do potentially plan on. I've said it before once or twice. Not a novella, but like a separate trilogy for Dane and Belina, which is the time in between the Exile and like the years where you don't see in the Exile. which is something that I want to do. And I did that again intentionally. You'll see when Belina is talking to Asen and he mentions the different things they're called in different places. And so that sets up stories that will happen. So there's things like that I definitely want to do, and it's just getting the time to do it all. But I want to be intentional because I don't want to just flood loads of novellas in. I want to kind of have them in between the books and have them there for a reason. So I haven't settled on the stories yet, but there's a lot of options.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think you mentioned a little bit of this earlier in a question. I can't remember. I think you did though. You started your writing career with a very big drive. You've got 3 books, 2 novellas within a couple of years, and it's about 3,200 pages, roughly.
Even pages. See, it's weird because pages don't equate in my head. Because, for instance, okay,
Words,
I'm formatting the paperback right now. Okay, the paperback for Of Darkness and Light, which is here, okay, is about 870 pages. Of War and Ruin is about 200,000 words longer than this, and it's only going to be an extra 100 pages.
Oh, fair enough.
Because my printer quite literally does not allow me to go bigger. And Amazon, it's an issue you have being an indie author. Amazon doesn't allow you to list 2-volume paperbacks on the book sale page for my book, so I can't do I can't break it up. So with my formatting, it has to be kind of smaller font. With the hardback, it was easier, but what I faced was what a lot of publishers face. You know, when sometimes mid-series, the book trim size changes. And so that's the decision I had to make. And I don't want to piss people off. But so the difference was I either make this book, this is 5 inches by 8 inches, either make it to 6 by 9, so it fits in and the text is more comfortable, or I have to shrink the font and I have to change the margins and the line spacing, which is what I've decided to do. But it does mean that, you know, the pages are going to be a bit more cramped to keep the trim size. And I don't think many publishers face, you know, the book increasing in 200,000 words, but it's something that I've had to deal with here. And so I've done it now, and they're basically formatted and ready to go. But like the paperback font, the hardback font will be more or less the same size. I think I brought it from 11 to 10.5. So it's basically the same, but the paperbacks have to drop a little bit. But it won't be dissimilar to some of the, like the Wheel of Time books, when you sometimes just see them. They're big, but they're actually quite small. And paperbacks sometimes it's quite condensed font.
You mentioned that you obviously have plans to write hopefully different ones outside of The Bound and the Broken. Do you have plans to write different stories outside of The Bound and the Broken as an entire new cast of characters or worlds, or a different genre?
Yeah, very much so. I've always wanted to write like a space opera fantasy, and I've always, one thing that I've had in my head for quite a while is I kind of want to write, and Jay Kristoff, who is a lovely guy by the way, he came out with fucking Empire the Vampire, and that's actually not the title, fucking Empire the Vampire, but it's more like, that's my opinion right now, because maybe 3 months before I heard about Empire the Vampire, I came up with the concept that I wanted to kind of do a kind of vampire inspired, kind of like a zombie outbreak set in a third world fantasy setting, except it's not zombies, it's vampires, and they're not sparkly. They fuck you up.
Yes.
And so what I wanted to do was kind of blend horror and fantasy, and create something out of that, which is something I've really wanted to do for a long time. When I say long time, I mean, like, you know, as long as I've started writing. So there's a few things that I have ideas for, but I definitely, the Bound and the Broken world is like my passion. So there'll always be stuff in that for me. But I always want to create as well concise finish points. Like I don't want to just stretch this series out for 14 books. No. Like I want, if I need 6 books for this series, I'll do 6, but I kind of want to get it in 5. But I'll explore different parts of the world too. But this story is its own story, and I don't want to go crazy on it. But there's other worlds and there are other things that I definitely want to explore.
So you set up your own Discord for fans of your work. What inspired you to do that, and how has it affected your relationship with your readers?
Well, actually, I was part of the Oasis Discord maybe a year ago now. And then there was the author channel in there. And I said to people, hey, look, I'm not going to drop in and read your comments because I want you to be able to talk about stuff. But like, if you tag me, I will come in and I'll chat about whatever you're tagging me about. And that was really fun because I got to engage with the readers a lot, and I really enjoyed it. And then the Oasis got rid of, they stopped authors being able to look at their own channel, which was totally, like, that's legitimate. It's the reason why I said to the people in there, like, I'm not going to go in unless you tag me. But then what happened there is I then lost all the conversation I was having with my readers. So I chatted to Viv and to Nina, who are the moderators in my Discord. I said, hey, I kind of want to set one up. Like, would you guys help me? Because I don't have a clue how this thing functions. And they were amazing, and they helped me set it up. And they just, in their free time, just chill out and just make sure everything's okay. It's great. And it's been fantastic. I don't know if I'm like an anomaly in that. Like, some of my favorite stuff is the fan interaction. And no, I can't say the word fan. I tried to. It's weird. But the reader interaction is something that I really enjoy. And I enjoy social media, and I enjoy Discord, and like, I like setting up my website, and those kind of things are kind of fun to me. Okay. So it's great. Yeah, it's something I've been actually looking forward to, is being able to take a little bit of break from writing and do some of the other fun stuff too.
Yeah, it's actually really nice. The readathon that you did was really enjoyed by everyone, because obviously they got to ask you questions as they were reading through it, and you answered them, and it was really useful for that as well. But
there's some stuff I just have to say read and find out, because there's some questions that get asked, and I'm like, this is literally a series spoiler, and like, I cannot answer it. Like, or it's something I'm planning on answering in the series as a reveal, and I'm kind of going, I can't answer that question. Yeah. But like, if I can answer it, I always try to.
Yeah. So an interesting one now, the broken binding. How much of an effect on your writing career do you think the relationship with the broken binding has had? And how did your relationship with them start? And then on from that, how did your special edition come to exist?
Yeah, they've had a massive effect on my career in general. Like, I think I was already selling really well before we got in touch, but I think what they did for me was I was signing a lot of my books and wrapping them and shipping them and doing all that over here. And then eventually, like, they took that over for me, and it's freed up so much of my time. And it gave like readers across the world access to signed editions. And I could provide that because I was going to have to stop doing that because I was taking so much writing time away. And I cannot say it enough. I think sometimes broken binding gets some stick online, and what people forget is like the broken binding for me, what I love, right? Because it started out as something just chatting and become really good friends. And for me, like, Matt started the broken binding with £300 on his mom and dad's spare room, like less than 2 years ago. And people kind of forget that, and they try and compare it to these businesses that have been going for 7 or 8 years. And like, you're still talking about like people who all are just trying their hardest. And I mean, their hardest. It's crazy. Like, it's lovely to see. I don't think Matt's one of the most generous people I've ever met. And he's really helped me. And anytime I need help with stuff, when I was sending out my arcs for Of Darkness and Light, my physical ones, he was like, get them all sent here. We'll wrap them. We'll ship them. We'll do all this sort of stuff. Like, they're one of the only ones supporting indie authors and actually supporting them hard, not just kind of like taking little bits. They really get behind them, which is fantastic. And honestly, like, it was really funny because the way it all started was they had messaged me about getting stocked for Blood and Fire. And then eventually I got a call with Matt, and he was going to order like 5 copies of each, because they can usually be quite hesitant of getting stock in of indie authors at the start, because, like, you know, they didn't have a warehouse, they had nothing. Matt literally stored the books in his house. So when they started, so storage space was limited. But what ended up happening is, even with that limited storage space, now they've obviously expanded since, he got drunk on the phone call, and the 5 books switched to 100 of each. Okay. And that just kind of went from there. And it was the same with the special edition. We were talking about stuff, and because we have a time difference, I'm in New Zealand, and sometimes he'll call me and it's 2 a.m. there, and he's come back from the pub, and I'll be there writing, and he's like, mate, we should do a special edition. It'll be fantastic. And he's like, I got you, you know, we'll do everything for it. You know, we'll try and we'll make it as affordable. And that's the thing. I don't think a lot of people are very much directly equatable to sub press and to degree one press and anything else. They're not leather bound because we didn't want to bring the price bracket up to that level. And I think everything Matt does is quite intentional in that he wants the books to be affordable. That's what he's trying to do. Like he actually started a lot of this because he couldn't buy special editions and couldn't afford them. So it was almost selfish now. Well, if I do this and I can sell these, then I can get cheap special editions. But it's the idea of keeping them affordable for people. And like £55 is a lot of money for a book. I know it is. But when you compare that same spec to £200 or £150, it's quite a big difference, which is something that I loved. But he's like, yeah, we'll do it. And then I was like, okay, Matt, sure. And I wake up the next day and I was like, oh, you don't remember the call last night, do you? And he was like, yeah, I do. I absolutely do. We're going to special edition. We're going to nail it. And it was great. Like it's fantastic. It's the support they've given is great. And I'm seeing it now. They're starting to spread out to more indie authors and they want to do some more stuff. And like, it's one of the first places a lot of indies are actually getting stocked, not just listed online, but the stock is actually being stored live there. And once the shop has stock, they have incentive to sell, which is massive. So yeah, I actually don't have enough good things to say about the Broken Binding. Like it's crazy. I can't believe someone has taken like £300 in a fucking bedroom and turned it into this international operation that actually there's always going to be bumps and hiccups and shipping issues when you have like 4 people spread across the country trying to work together. But my God, it's impressive.
It is. Leading on from how much they do for indie and that, are there any indie fantasy books out there that you're a fan of and you think deserve more love and recognition?
There's loads. Oh my God, it's amazing. I haven't had a chance. The crazy thing for me is I read a lot, but I haven't been able to read as much as I'd like to since I started writing. And then I haven't read a lot of indie. I've read more indie than trad since I've become an indie author, but I still haven't read a lot of books. Still haven't had the chance. But ones that I have read, I've read some of Philip C. Quintrell, who is amazing. I say, does he deserve more recognition? No, because he already sells crazy amounts of books. He's fantastic. His books are brilliant. I'm trying to think. I've read quite a few now over the last while, and I always remember. M.L. Spencer is fucking fantastic. I read Dragon Mage, and I adored every page, and that rhymed, and I didn't intend it to rhyme. But there's loads, and there's people working their ass off. Like Crystal Matar's books are all over the place now. They're starting to spread, but they're just people who are working really damn hard. Like my editor Sarah, in this kind of really rabid, like dense but rabid fan base, and it's really cool to see. There's so many. I think like if you're looking for stuff that's similar to mine, like I definitely say Philip C. Quintrell, Michael Orr Miller. M.L. Spencer are kind of 3 who are very in that wheelhouse. It's very much similar type of fantasy, so that's what I definitely go for. But yeah, there's loads. There's so many. It's kind of a bit baffling.
Yes, there are a lot of them out there. So let's end on something a little controversial, and you might say there is no answer for it. Are there any fantasy books or authors that you think are overrated, and if so, who?
So I'm gonna be honest. I'm not gonna answer the question, and it's not for a cop-out thing. Is I really don't like negativity with this sort of stuff. I'm really against it. So like even any there's booktubers who might hate me for it, but like anyone who kind of put up like my worst reads of 2022 and stuff, I actually just muted. People who I like, but I can't. There's so much negativity in the world, and I think particularly when you're an author. With these negative reviews, like people write some reviews to try and hurt you, and like I've seen them, and they're mean, they're horrible, and like it's not about the book. It's not about whether the book is good or bad. There's like reviews that just hurt people, and I think if I sit here and I say, well, this author is overrated, and that author sees it, like I can upset them, and I don't want to upset them, whether I think their book is good or bad. So. I know, again, I have a little bit of a cop-out answer, but it's something I feel quite strongly about, and I never answer that question. And I also will never negatively review a book. Not that I'll ever give it a higher review than I think it will be. I just won't say anything about it, because I'd rather tell people the books that I love, because it makes me feel better because I'm saying nice things, and hopefully it makes other people feel better because nice things are being said about them and the books.
No, I agree. I review I review books on Instagram, and even if it's not something I review really highly, I will never intentionally offend someone. And even if it's not something if I've at least finished it, I liked it enough to get to the end, and I will always say I finished it. I would recommend it to people who still like something similar to it, but there's no need to be intentionally hateful about it or harmful or anything like that.
But that's it. Like, there's nothing wrong with someone leaving negative reviews. Like, of course not. Jesus Christ. Like, some people you review some people just review everything they read regardless, and they can be negative, they can be positive. It's just a personal thing for me. I just I don't want to do that, and I'm not a reviewer as well, so I don't really have to. It's just if I like a book, I'll tell people, and then if I don't, I will just probably not open it again on my Kindle, and then the world will keep spinning. So.
Fair enough. So that's the end of that one. So thank you everyone for listening in. Thank you, Ryan, for agreeing to talk with me today. You can find Ryan on Twitter. His handle is Cahill Author, and on Instagram he's Ryan Cahill Author, or on his website www.ryancahillauthor.com. And you can also find more on his antics and upcoming work on his Discord. And don't forget, if you
antics is an appropriate word.
Really is. That chaos.
It really is.
Don't forget, if you want to get more information on our upcoming question and answers or other events, then check in on our community Discord. You can also find us on Instagram using @fantasy_fellowship on Instagram, and Twitter @fanfellowship. And we also have our very own website, www.fantasy-fellowship.co.uk. If you've enjoyed this Q&A, be sure to hit like, and to keep up to date with more Fantasy Fellowship videos, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you all next time.